Hello, my name is Mark. I come outside the Retro Gaming Bard and my channel, Mr. Retro Gaming Bard. And yeah, happy New Year 2024. I'm tempting to do a top 20 albums of my choice of 2023. And I'm just gonna go right into it. Hopefully, this will be all done in one take. We will see because editing is a pain in the butt. But pretty much, long story short, I've listened to 155 albums that caught my attention throughout 2023. And actually, 23 of them caught my attention. So there will be three honorable mentions. So I guess without further ado, let's start with an honorable mention. So, right off the bat, we have Farmia. So Vamia is a wonderful mix of black metal, death metal, but heavily focuses on pagan metal. And I guess you could count this having some folk metal influence as well. Yes, there is a language barrier. They sing in Poland or Polish, and but the pagan metal aspect is something that's new to me, but to my understanding, I guess it's really on the theme of it all, but also on the vocal deliveries. Not only you got your typical, I say typical, but your run-of-the-mill death metal, black metal vocals, but also you get these chants and these like melodic deliveries that it kind of feels like you're in a ritual, which may scare the casual listener, but it's such a new concept to my ears. I find it very interesting. And since this was a January release and I still enjoy it to this day, yeah, absolutely deserved to be on the spot. Despite this being an honorable mention, I definitely recommend you all to check this lovely EP out. And speaking of EPs, let's keep it rolling with Songs for the Willow from a band called One Step Closer. And they're not a Linkin Park tribute band by any means, but One Step Closer, another subgenre I'm not totally familiar with, post-hardcore or melodic hardcore, I suppose. But um, But to me, if I didn't look them up and realize what genre they're labeled as, to me they're like a rock band with a bite. I mean, they won't be doing any like death metal vocals or anything, but you can tell when he yells, it's still melodic enough for you to know what they're singing, what they're saying. But it but very catchy, guitar work, and they met the criteria when it comes to like to the rock genre. It got me singing along, got me bopping. I may not be doing the hardcore dancing or anything, but it's such a good enough listen that again deserves to be on the list. Despite how short it is too. Sure, you get your three songs, but it's only 9 minutes long of an EP, but still an enjoyable listen nevertheless to this day. Another January release, by the way. And last honorable mention, we got ourselves Outlaw, Reaching Beyond Asaya. The first full-length album I'll be talking about, and it's kind of hard for me to describe it. I didn't really dig deep into what they're labeled as, but to my ears, definitely your death metal, melodic death, instrumentally speaking, I suppose, and I guess vocally speaking, yeah, I hear some black metal influence as well. But still, the overall wonderful package. I guess the highlights I can think of right off the bat is um, at one of their tracks, beautiful usage of a gong. So yeah, being have an ear out for that at the beginning of the first half of the album for that gong part. You can't miss it. Wonderful build up to it, but as a whole sound all together, wonderful songwriting. Uh, uh, the songwriting, how they pieces their songs together, and just a wonderful death metal ride for sure. So now we're heading into the, as I check my notes here, the top 20 albums for sure. And yeah, let's enjoy this wonderful ride, shall we? Starting with, oh, this lovely album. Don't let it scare you. It's the band called Off-Road Minivan with the album May This Keep You Safe from Harm. And, um, and this album, it's another rock group. And to my ears, you're going to hear that phrase a lot. To my ears, it sounds like a splash of emo, I suppose. For those who are very much more familiar with this band than I am, please correct me in the comments below. But and I'm saying the word emo because of their choice of topics, the struggle of relations and everything. But again, just like One Step Closer, they met the criteria to make it on the list as a rock band. Got me singing along, got me bopping, got me uh, more than bopping. There's some really good heavy licks in there as a rock band. Um, and the only weird thing about this album, in a good way, interesting, I should say, not weird, interesting, is that they do have like interlude tracks, but instead of having it like on their own, they attach it to the end of the song, segueing into the next song. It's an interesting take, so keep that in mind if you decide to put on shuffle or anything. It's more enjoyable if you listen to this album from start to finish. No shuffle needed. The next band um, on number 19 is, well, Spirit Box, The Fear of Fear, which may be a big surprise because by far it's the most popular band on my list, and yet I put them on the 19th spot. And the main reason is that despite the gorgeous production and the range of the vocals, both harsh and melodically speaking, um, Spirit Box admittedly is one of those bands that it kind of grew on me over time. It wasn't an immediate, hit to my ears, and it was a November release. So at the end of December, I was in a difficult position, like where am I going to put this album? Since all the albums before then either grew on me to the point that they outrank them, or maybe you know, 3 months from now, I'm going to do a follow-up video, admitting, yeah, this album should be much higher on my list. My apologies, but I still love it. With the synth work, and again the vocals is definitely the highlight of the whole thing. Wonderful package all around. Um, Very excited what they have in store in the future since this is an EP, I believe. Yeah. Um, so yeah, moving on. Wonderful job without a doubt, Spirit Box. And speaking of EPs, yeah, on the 18th spot we got ourselves a trend kill, a dissociate, and this is the going from the biggest well-known band to possibly the smallest. I actually discovered them through the YouTube channel of Beheading the Trader, which I believe is not technically a record label YouTube channel, but they do an amazing job finding small bands, you know, try and get as much help as they can. And with Trendkill, for those who are really big fans of a particular 90s groove metal band, may see a connection of their style, and they totally have that. Uh, the band Greta Van Fleet or Greta Van Fleet, that they sound almost identical to Led Zeppelin. Trendkill is definitely similar to that, but with another band. And I don't want to mention that said band. Again, for those see the band name of Trendkill, may already know who I'm talking about. Yes, vocally speaking, it does sound like and guitar wise, it does sound like them. But I did triple check with all the songs, the originals, don't you worry. But holy moly, just the groove of it and the variety between the four songs, and even the order of the songs amazes me. The closing track is definitely a banger, a personal favorite of mine. But yeah, Trendkill, Dissociate, and if you don't know which band I'm talking about, that they definitely have that huge sound from. Definitely take a guess in the comments below, and or better yet, check them out first, and then take your guess in the comments below. Okay, so yes, so the next band on the 17th spot. Yes, I'm using a checklist just to make sure I'm not skipping anyone. Is Grove Street, The Path of Righteousness. And with this album, yeah, again, a genre that I'm not particularly big on, truth be told, and that is hardcore, but there's a lot of old school metal elements in it that I really enjoy. Maybe a throwback to like 80s thrash, maybe. I didn't really get into metal until like the late 90s, so I kind of missed that boat, truth be told. But still, the thing about this album that may sound like a negative, but it's really not. None of the songs really stuck out to me. However, the journey throughout the entire album is a lot of fun. Definitely got me. Between this band and like One Step Closer, yeah, this one almost got me wanting to do some hardcore dancing, but it's kind of weird doing that by yourself in the living room. But but it's a fun listen without a doubt. And hey, it may be a possible gateway for me to check out more hardcore bands. But then again, with a subgenre that I'm not totally familiar with, maybe there's a whole slew of subgenres of hardcore that I have no idea about. So, with that being said, if you're a hardcore fan, please, yeah, enlighten me with your knowledge in the comments below. Let's see. Oh, yes, Death Ray Vision at number 16th. No Mercy from Electric Eyes. Um, Yeah, quite the title for both the band and the album name. But all I can say about this album is if Armageddon happens to happen in the near future, this is your album of choice when that happens. A lot of like end of the world themes lyrically with, everything you could think of that could go wrong with the world. Um, and it's the type of metal that, dare I say, maybe more radio friendly. The vocals, yeah, they're harsh, but you can tell what they're singing. And I think they it's bands members from other bands as well, kind of like a super group in a way. But whatever the history is, the music itself, such a fun listen to. Um, and yeah, just again, if the world decides to go into ruins, this is the album to pick for sure. Wonderful, like I want to say like good old like modern. I want to say thrash, but yeah, definitely like a modern metal take for sure. Okay, so next up, something completely different. On number 15th, we got The Damned. Now be damned. With their album Darkadelic. Have you ever discovered a band that you're like, okay, it looks like they've been around for a few years. I wonder what their entire discography is all about, and realize they actually started from the 70s? Yeah, this is that band for me, The Damned. And admittedly, I didn't really check out their older stuff. So, with my knowledge with just this album, holy moly, it's a wonderful breath of fresh air of like the old school, if that makes sense. Like the songwriting, their how they craft their songs is totally a lost art. Like, yes, there's no metal in it. A lot of, dare I say, like maybe psychedelic or rockadelic. Again, genres I'm not familiar with. You're going to hear that phrase from me quite a bit throughout this list, which is wonderful because I'm discovering such new sounds that I enjoy. But I guess in their words, darkadelic, yeah, there's definitely an old school feel to this, but with a new sound. And, like such wonderful hooks with backing vocals. And like there's one particular song that's like a jam session, uh, which is wonderful. There's drum solos that I'm like, oh, that's awesome because again, it's a certain style that's a lost art with today's bands. Um, and as a drummer, I caught on to that. So again, like such a fantastic discovery. And once I had the free time, I would love to check out their older stuff. I know I have learned that's not all of the original members, and I think there has been some like breakups and re reunited and all that kind of stuff. But still, like with the lineup they have now, and yes, they're getting up there in age, but holy moly, don't stop making music. I want more. Awesome job. Um, Speaking about, ooh, damned. Well, number 14th, we got Hell Ripper, Warlocks Grim and Withered Hags. And holy hell, um, where do I begin with this one? Speed metal, speed metal, speed metal. Again, not the type of genre I'm familiar with. When I read up on them before listening to that album, that they're like a speed metal group, my definition of speed metal is totally different from what I've heard. But yeah, the guitars are like out of this world. I mean, the whole band, not just the guitars, but solos galore, riffs galore, um, and both like in a chaotic, rhythmic way, but also like when you hear the guitar solos, it's not only hectic, but there's some melodic parts as well, which makes sense. The only the only thing that I'm still getting used to with this album, which just like Spirit Box, I'm sure there's a fan base out there that's like, why is it only at 14th? Because yes, the sudden changes in one part of the song to the next part of the song is a bit jarring to me. But if that's more up your alley with like harsh vocals, uh, uh, um, especially with a theme of folklore, like Scottish folklore, which is wonderful to learn. Um, yeah, Hell Ripper is where it's at. Like, holy moly! Like, if you're I'm a drummer myself, but I can imagine if you're like a guitarist that has the need for speed, check these guys out. Okay, moving on to unlucky number 13th, but I'm lucky to discover them, and that is The Gorge, Mechanical Fiction. And a subgenre that I don't usually get into, but they've done it so well that yeah, they're probably my new favorite of sets genre, and that is like extreme progressive metal. I mean, like extreme to the point that uh, only a few moments throughout the album it feels like they stick with a common time of 4/4 time. In other words, a time signature or a certain rhythms that you can easily tap your toes to. But for the most part, it's like, no, we're gonna get strange, we're gonna go wacky, we're gonna pull every, odd rhythms at you as much as we can, and yet still sound as fluent as they could. Like there's like hints of like power metal in there, hints of hardcore in there, or maybe metalcore. Again, genres I'm not really familiar with, but it's all progressive. And yes, sure the vocals are a bit monotone in the growls. But I mean, with everything that the rest of the band is doing, it's actually a compliment, with all that weird timing they pull off. And, they just got the straight up growls to like, just not go too crazy um, along with the band. I've heard a lot of other progressive metal bands throughout the year, um, and sometimes they forced in such odd timing rhythms and just sounds, you know, too weird or maybe just too uh I guess jarring. Since I already used that word, might as well use it again. But again, the Gorge Mechanical Fiction, like the band managed to make it sound super fluent. Maybe not through your first listen, but when you give this a second listen, knowing what to expect, it's like it all comes together so wonderfully. So yeah, amazing work, uh, without a doubt. At number 12, this is not a typo, I swear. Temple Balls, Avalanche. And yeah, so how much fun do you want in your metal? And this isn't going to be the first time I ask you this question, spoiler alert. But Temple Balls is a wonderful hard rock band that's like, with the name of that, they know they can't take themselves too seriously. But at the same time, though, from what I've listened to, I think they also in a realization that they really can't get too goofy as well. I've heard a lot of cheese this past year when it comes to metal, especially when it comes to power metal or your hard rock bands, or I like to call them as dad rock bands. But no, this one absolutely nailed how much, serious tone it should have, but how much cheese it would have, and how much fun altogether it has as well. I mean, when I talk about cheese, I'm talking about like 80s synth, like drum, like toms or whatnots, and the vocals, like he sells it, but he doesn't oversell it. And I'm not a guitarist, but there's some crazy licks in there that I'm like, yeah, this is a good, solid band, despite the wacky name they decided to call themselves. But I mean, yeah, Temple Balls, Avalanche, like really solid stuff. Holy moly. Did how again, how much fun do you want in your metal? And I say they inverted camera, I'm sorry. They nailed the fun part. And at number 11, just outside of number 10th, is something completely different, the Infinity Ring. Um, Let me just double check. Nemesis and Nativity. Yes, if only it's on the actual album itself, but beautiful artwork, by the way. But yeah, the Infinity Ring. Um, Not very familiar of their genre, despite how much I've listened to it. I mean, of all the subgenres that I couldn't quite, you know, describe, at least I know what it's called. With the Infinity Ring, though, I still don't know what to call them, like subgenre wise. Yes, I guess I could have done some research and whatnots. Was it dark synth? Not quite. Is it, industrial? Not really. Um, is it synthy? Well, maybe one song, but bear with me. I actually got this on vinyl, and that's when it super clicked with me because it's such a interesting listen to my ears. Apparently, the first half of it, side A, th that kind of sound is like your very avant-garde, like kind of very atmospheric, but not too atmospheric that it doesn't have a beat. It has a beat, but you do hear like violins faintly in the background, and some beautiful like clean guitar work, but nothing, no shreddy guitar, just a nice relaxing kind of melodic strumming, or just being melodic in general with the guitars. And the vocals, there's only one song I like to compare it to, like that low baritone, like dare I say typo negative kind of deal. But for the most part, you really can't compare vocals with Peter Steele from typo negative. He does have his own tone, a bit monotone, but it works. And then you get to the second side of the album, side B, which is like, okay, that's when the distortion comes to play. The drums hit much harder, despite how simple they can be, but it's very effective. And the whole creepiness just cranks up to 11. And but it all pays off with the closing track, which I feel like is the best closing track of the year, despite this album being number 11th. But it's such an interesting listen. There's a chance that, first listen, you may not like it. Second listen, it may click, it may not click. But no doubt, it's the most unique album uh, that I listened to throughout last year. And it's like I wanted to be in the top 10. It breaks my heart to put in number 11th, but the Infinity Ring, holy moly, you got my attention. Thank you. And speaking of attention, nope, no longer in the top 20. We are now in the top 10. Holy moly. And like I'm going to have a lot of fun talking about with these albums. So before I start overthinking and pause in awkwardness, let's get on to number 10. And that is Rushka Turbo Polka Party. And holy moly, I ask again, how much fun do you want in your metal? If you want to call them a metal band. Like I have, I really want to include them in the top 10 because the variety within this album is ridiculous, not only in the instrumental state of things or the genre state of things, but also vocally speaking. Like, yeah, a band like Rushka Yars, it screams Russian to you, despite them being from Austria. But there are some songs in Spanish. There's some songs in English. There are some songs in Russian, of course. And I think there's one song in German as well. I think thanks to a guest vocalist. But still, this it's like a melting pot of languages happening within this album. Even within the same song, there's different languages happening. But it's fun, you don't care, you're bopping. It's a mixed up ska, rock, yes, metal as well, and maybe some other like genres I'm not fully familiar with because it does have your Russian sound with the offbeats of hut, 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 and all that kind of stuff. Um, but And there's also other parts of the albums that totally won me over after a couple listens. I mean, like they did a cover of Last Christmas, and I hate the original Last Christmas done by George Michael. But I mean, like they get special brownie points for that. And sure, the ska sound can be a little repetitive, but again, it's fun. It of all the albums, this one made me dance the most. And I say that without shame. Like, and and it's also a huge shame that they actually disbanded after this release. And if they truly don't feel like they're gonna come back together anytime soon, I say this is one hell of a record to go out with. So if that's really the case, Rushka Yar, thank you so much for not only this album, but even like the past albums. Um, like so much fun. Thank you. Ooh, well, let's go on with the number ninth spot of Oak Disintegrate. Totally change of mood with this one because this is a funeral doom metal band. Like, and the biggest draw I have for this one is, and I know other bands have done this, but hot take, this band did it the best, and that is the entire album is one song. And for them to construct a 45-minute song kept my interest throughout the whole thing without, you know, sounding repetitive. Debatably, I'll get to that. Uh, but also, going from one segment to the next quite cleanly, it felt like a journey. And I did read up on it a little bit, and the band's intentions. I'm going to paraphrase a bit. I don't want to, ruin it for everyone, but it is about a journey, without a doubt, and it ends in, well, tragedy, so to speak. But arguably due to one's choice. Um, so that's all I'm gonna, paraphrase for now. But I happen to have this on vinyl, which makes me worried because, how are they gonna split, a song in half, despite, 45-minute songs? And they did that well. Like the split was appropriate. It didn't feel like, it ruined the song at all. Split it into two parts. But it's very atmospheric. And I say debatably it's repetitive, but with a slow tempo of doom metal, and think of it as more of a big build up at certain parts. It's not like they repeat a certain thing for like 8 measures and then just go right into like the next part. No, there's a build up, there's tension, there's like dread in it, and you absolutely feel it. And yes, admittedly, the uh, uh, um the production is kind of in the rough side, but it kind of fits the theme. So it kind of, kind of enhance it in a way. But yeah, Oak with Disintegrate, this was, by the way, since it was a fairly early release, this was a top contender to be album of the year. And 8 bands or 8 albums, kind of took that away from it. Well, starting with at number 8, Mike Maines and the Branches, Memory Unfixed. And you're probably thinking, who are they? And dare I say, this is like my biggest guilty pleasure of the year because they are totally not metal at all. Um, like you could put a metal detector over it, and even the CD itself is not metal. Um, yeah, this is definitely the poppiest band I have on my list, and I don't care. It met the criteria. It got me singing along. It got me bopping. Um, maybe not to the point, and of course, there's no moshing involved. Um, and I have heard, a few pop-ish albums throughout the year, and they all, from what I've heard, they all had one thing in common, and that is sometimes the lyrics are super mushy. But honestly, with this album, Mike Maines, I really like his lyrics. I mean, yes, the final track is very mushy, but it's the final track. You're already along for the ride, and might as well, at that point, I really don't care. Um, but no, lyrically speaking, I mean, like, I don't want to read too much into it, but there are some simple one-liners that stuck with me, and it's not all of Mike's doing. I mean, he has a another vocalist in the band, and she does a wonderful job as well. Like their tones work together. They have songs that, they do duets, trade off verses and everything. Heck, there's even a song that, she takes over, the stage, and it's all on her. So um, I'm really glad I branched out and discovered this band. Pun is totally intended. Deal with it. And yeah, deal with me including a very poppy album in my list, despite this being mostly metal. No shame. Um, but hey, I'll tell you what, let's meet in the middle. If you happen to know anyone that's not really a big metalhead, but does like some kind of rock, even if it's like super light, you know, you can thank me for having this band on my list. Ho- no shame. Um, okay, so going back to the metal, at lucky number 7, and yes, I am very lucky to discover this band, and that is Blackscape, Suffocated by the Sun. Um, a lot to talk about with this band, to the point that I may not get all the info right, but again, I'm kind of relying on my ears because you probably noticed, with the exception of Mike Man's and the Branches, I don't really talk about lyrics. I just talk about like, you know, the genre and like the guitar work and the what I like about it. But with Blackscape Suffocated by the Sun, yes, melodic death metal to the core, and the drummer, amazing drummer, holy moly, like he does so many crazy grooves but doesn't like distract the song. Like as a drummer myself, it caught my attention but it doesn't mess up the songs at all. Just listen for that as you give when you give this one a chance. But vocally speaking, you got a nice mixture of, hard vocals and, melodic singing. And again, vocally speaking, I said hard vocals because for the most part, you do understand what he's singing about. And that's when, lyrically speaking, I think the theme with this one is definitely aimed towards like religious wars and everything. Like it's to a point that I was wondering, are they really a Christian metal band? Or as I listened to it some more, it's like, no, it's definitely more towards uh, uh, um, like war or like battles due to like religious disbeliefs or conflictions or whatnot. And I could be absolutely wrong, but that's what I've took from it, from multiple tracks. Um, but it, but whatever the theme they're going for, like, again, drumming wise, it's amazing. And even the guitar work, or think about it. Sorry, I got drums on the mind. I'm a drummer. But yeah, even the guitar works, like the licks they have, which felt like solos, but no, it's just crazy guitar fills that trans transitions really nicely from like, bridges to choruses to verses, whatever the order they have. And if you happen to get this in a physical copy, I really hope the bonus track is included because their instrumental bonus track is like icing on the cake. Absolutely. So, holy moly, this is like one of my biggest surprises as well. But yeah, Blackscape, wonderful, wonderful discovery for sure. And at number 6, we got Viscera, Carcinogenesis. Um, Arguably, depending on your definition of heavy, arguably the heaviest band on this list. Deathcore, what can I say? I'm not particularly crazy about hardcore. I'm not particularly crazy about metalcore. And I'm totally not particularly crazy about deathcore. I've heard like slam music and deathcore bands throughout the years, and like to my ears are like a dime a dozen. Maybe I'm just looking at the wrong places. I don't know. And then Viscera comes along, and the vocalist, holy moly, he like definitely opened my eyes on like, okay, this is how a deathcore vocalist should sound like. and and the instrumental parts of it as well, same thing. Like the maybe again, I'm looking at the wrong places, but deathcore bands these days rely on like one trick ponies, like with like both vocally and instrumentally speaking. And yes, this particular band did do that trick I'm talking about, but they only did it once um, on both departments out of the whole album. And it still feels very deathcore. It feels groovy at times. It feels like, but all around epic. Um, and like of all the genres that, you know, I have a theory that with every genre, there is still one really top key representation of that genre. And for me, for deathcore, Viscera, absolutely. Holy moly. At number five, this is a very interesting talk because we got ourselves Ants Creek. I think I pronounced that correctly. Um, they're Danish metal band. And of all the genres, I'm surprised I didn't include a lot in this list. It's actually black metal. Yeah, like there are bands in this list already that has black metal influence, but this is black metal. And not only that though, maybe I favorite this band over like the rest of the black metal bands I've heard throughout the year because this is by far the most experimental black metal band I've discovered. And maybe it's just this album because when you check out the track listings, half of the tracks features a musician, whether it's on the guitar department or vocally speaking. But it's there, features this guy, this guy, this guy, like half the album. And it's in the first half as well. So it really got me, curious. Okay, will the second half be a repetitious slog then? Absolutely not. Like this whole album screams with variety. Like, and you're probably wondering, well, Mark, how experimental are we talking about? I'm not going to mention which track, but one of the tracks features a rapper rapping over a black metal like blast beats and like and a certain guitar lick. Um, yeah, like so no trap drums, no synthesized works. No, it's a rapper rapping over a metal beat. And admittedly, that took me a couple listens for me to enjoy it, but once it clicks, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, like I love it. And other guest musicians also killed it. I believe when it comes to either like guitar solos or additional vocal work, more on the secondary end of things. Um, but even like with the second half, when the band doesn't feature any guest musicians, like no, it's solid. And I think what also makes me gravitate this band more with the other black metal bands is the guitar tone. It's so dirty. However, it's heavy. Again, with your definition, what heavy is, but it's that unique sound that like it it really made me feel like ooh, but I like it. So yeah, Angst Creek, like amazing stuff, absolutely. At number four, well, just outside the top three, and it does pain for me to say that, but we got Convocation, No Dawn for the Caligulous Night. And holy moly, like another late release, but unlike Spirit Box, this hits hard within the first listen. And I know it's based on preference because it's that niche subgenre that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. and that is funeral doom metal. Yes, I mentioned that Oak was, a contender for the album of the year. As much as I've loved Oak's Disintegrate, this one, this one, holy moly, blew me away. And it's not only got your traditional funeral doom metal like distortion, tempo, really low growls, um, or just actually, actually no, he goes high a couple times more I think about it. So it's not just low vocals. Well, you got your beautiful strings and your choirs, and got your church bells or chimes, whatever you want to call them. I believe there's a cello solo, um, some kind of classical string solo there, and it's like, oh my gosh! And even with funeral doom metal, like it's there are times within the album that it's not so dark and doomy. There are segments that, you know, um, it's kind of melancholy in a way, but don't get me wrong, it does goes right into the heaviness. Not totally by surprise. They do build up each time very nicely, but I think that's the main reason why I put it on the fourth spot because of all these genres of metal, that is my absolute favorite that I could choose from. It is funeral doom metal. And knowing that this is such a niche genre and not everyone's gonna, dig it. Um, and maybe I'm in the wrong for putting them on the fourth spot and not the top three. But either way, though, like it's breathtaking to my ears. Convocation, holy moly. And side note, of all the record labels I discovered them through, it's through Everlasting Spew, which admittedly never expected that because this is technically the only album from that record label that I like. Um, so I mean, like Everlasting Spew, like holy moly, thank you for this wonderful album, for this band. And if you're a metalhead watching and you're in the mindset of like, oh, all the bands you're mentioning is, you know, not my kind of music. I want something more raw, more in your face, more. Okay, shout out to Everlasting Spew Records. Check them out. That's how I found this band. But the great majority of their stuff is maybe more of your taste. Okay. But side note aside, Convocation. Oh my gosh. Thank you. So, going back to the whole ranks thing, um, no longer the top 10. Now we're at number 3. So, without further ado, let me just double check on my clicks here. I'm doing this one shot. I'm making sure everything's all lined up. Spoiler alert, I'm using OBS to record this. So without further ado, holy moly, number 3. Let's get this show on the road, and we got ourselves Saddam Misery, Nazaroth. And despite how gruesome the band name is, don't let that scare you. Melodic death metal at its finest. I'm sorry, Blackscape, you're a wonderful melodic death metal band, but these guys kind of took it to the next level. Um, but holy moly. Now, I discovered them, since we're on the topic of record labels, I discovered them through, I guess, in comparison, a small record label of Testimony Records. And I'm so glad that I heard of this one. A little familiar with their previous album, and truth be told, wasn't too particularly crazy about it. And when they came up again and with the album of Mazuroth, I'm thinking, okay, we'll see how it goes. And with the first listen, there's a lot of surprises. There's clean vocals, arguably the best clean vocals I've heard in a melodic death metal group. Um, like the songwriting, they're very heavy, very groovy, definitely groovy, um, which I think a lot of your current metal bands are kind of missing the mark these days. Um, but there's that, and also like they have a certain theme that on a personal level I connect to. And I'm just gonna spoil it right there because it's whether I'm just gonna say it because I'm overthinking it. Yes, they do tackle about depression, okay? And it's not like they kind of hint it. No, they flat out, go for it because there's samples. I don't know how they did it exactly, if it's like a sample from like documents or uh, from like a doctor or a scientist or what have you, psychiatrist or what have you. But but it's been scattered throughout the entire album, and there's one song in particular that definitely spells it out for you that, hey, this is what we're, singing about. And the more I listen to it, the more I feel like maybe this whole album, just like Oaks Disintegrate, that it's a journey, you start from start to finish, and it tells you like the whole journey of one man's struggle with depression. Either way, though, like, the message hits hard for me on a personal level. And if it's that's the kind of topic that you're not comfortable listening to, I personally understand. But I mean, you know, when I was making this list and this album came to mind, this was again a a number one contender for album of the year. And I was toying the ideas like, well, maybe I should put it at number one, but alas, long story short, here it is at number three. But yeah, truly, truly amazing stuff. And here we are going at number two, second place. And this is going to be even a tougher uh, uh, decision that I had to make because this album was going to be number one for the longest time. And alas, it didn't happen. And without further ado, the album is Sermon of Golden Verse. And even the name of the album wanted it to win the gold, but I'm so sorry. Someone, you know, I had to go with the other choice. But let's focus on this one. Why do I like this one so much that took the silver? Um, and that is, holy moly, progressive metal, but in a sense that it reminds me a lot like Tool. And I hate to compare bands, but the vocal range on this guy is fantastic. The power and the clarity, the control of his voice. And yeah, there's a little bit of growls there, but I think this is the absolute album that if you had a friend that's not really crazy about metal or whatnot, or maybe doesn't want to give metal a chance, or maybe, haven't gave metal a chance. This is the ultimate gateway album of the year for that. Um, Mostly clean singing, but not whiny. His vocal controls are amazing, and the drummer, yeah, just just as great. The drummer is amazing, and there's some atmospheric times, like they do have interludes of like that segues into the next track, but it's their own tracks, unlike off-road minivans album. Uh, which is fine. But with them, if you really want to get to to the point, to the good stuff, you can just go right into the song. Well, honestly, still, I think if you listen to it from start to finish, that's even more rewarding to my ears. Um, and when it comes to the clean singing and everything, yes, it met all the criterias. I sing along with it, I bop to it, and it's heavy enough that, if I see them live, I want to mosh to it. Absolutely. And yeah, such an amazing journey, going from start to finish with this group. Wonderful variety, all catchy songs. But if I have to give the gold, unfortunately, it's not them. The gold, as I click the right buttons, my goodness, Mark, there you go. And good old Microsoft Paint fashion. My choice of album of the year. Um, well, needless to say, is Finsterforst Jenseits, if I pronounce that correctly. And then the weird twist of thing, yeah, an album that has a lot of silver in it. No, I'm giving this the gold. So why this one of all the albums I've talked about? Well, when making this top 20 list, I gotta make comparisons. I gotta check out the pros and cons. And even though I didn't really mention the cons with the previous albums, um, there were cons there, whether they had a weak, closing track or a weak opening track or a weak middle track or, some creative choices that, they're good but not spectacular. With Finster Forest, where do I begin? Well, let's start with the genre, okay? German folk metal, okay? So folk metal, we talked about not a lot of folk metal bands when I think about it within this list, but I have listened to quite a bit of folk metal groups in general throughout the year. And it really depends on where they're located, really. So that's kind of like a harsh or hard comparison. Um, but the folkiness I can compare it to is just like the very first album I talked about, Bamiya's Prologue, they have used instruments that make it folk-like, but I never thought the way they mixed it, like with the accordion, the flute, there's a reed instrument there as well, the organ, just blends so nicely with the distortion or whatever, guitar drum parts are happening. Um, But like Oak, Disintegrate, I know I've been comparing that band a lot, but it's a journey. Like that album, this is technically one song as well. The only thing they did differently intentionally that they did split it up into four movements. So you do get four tracks, but they, segue so cleanly together. And maybe it's my orchestral background that loved that so much because, like every movement, there's a theme. You got your opening track, which, like, the very first thing you hear in this album, if that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what will. Just saying. And then they up it up a notch with the second movement. And then the third movement, they, tone it down quite a lot. Yeah, it happens to be my favorite track of all because the production, the recording is gorgeous, and the clean singing really threw me off guard by a really good, like in the best way ever. And then, of course, the grand finale, the big epic, everything comes together and it does come full circle. Um, that's all I'm going to say without spoiling anything. But it's the journey of the album that makes this absolutely fantastic. And and the vocals. It's not just the main vocalist. There's multiple vocals involved within the band. I did a quick research and like yeah, like they all have their own choir, as in what you hear is within the band. Like they didn't hire any outside vocalists, to my knowledge. But you do see in the list of members, a lot of them do backing tracks, and you do, I mean, not backing tracks, I'm sorry, backing vocals, and you hear that in the album quite a bit, and it sounds phenomenal. And with this being like a folk metal, yes, all in German, but to the best of my ability, I sing along with it, I bop with it, and yeah, like it's definitely something that I, I cannot deny. Like everything it did is perfection to my ears. And if I would give any album a 10 out of 10, it's absolutely this one, without a doubt. So, but that's but that's being with that being said, everyone, you know, because that happens to be my favorite, please, I've listened to 155 albums and 23 of them made it on my list. So that's saying a lot. So don't just focus on like the top album or the top 10. Check out every album I mentioned whenever I have the time and let me know what your thoughts are. Heck, let me know which album you're surprised didn't make the list. Um, so with that being said, no fancy outro. If you made it this long, I thank you. I'll see you next time.